Alright, so in this video I want to add a little bit more context and perhaps extrapolate on some of my personal and subjective reasons for having an interest and an inclination towards practicing and training internal arts in a fairly regular and committed way. Just because looking at terms such as Qigong or Neigong or Taoism in general, there's a lot of confusion and people use these words very loosely and sometimes don't really explain what they mean, or they talk about them in very abstract, very far removed types of things. So because I'm teaching this workshop in less than a month or about a month from now, I basically want to give some more tangible, relatable aspects and also have the caveat that it's fairly subjective and relative to me and why some of what my interest is. Obviously that's a huge subject, a huge question, and I'm not going to sit here and go into like hours and hours of explanation on that, but I just want to give you a few kind of overview concepts for things that are very interesting to me. The first is the fact that the process and the practice, at least that I've learned and am now able to share some aspects of, what I really quite enjoy about it is that it is not cerebral, it is not purely theoretical. Obviously theory plays a huge piece in understanding the how and the why, and that's also relates to another aspect that I really actually quite enjoy is I mean, I've studied a lot of different systems with a lot of different teachers and actually been asked to leave from some, and generally one of the major frustrations that I have is and this is also a frustration that really applies really across the board for kind of life in general, but also specifically when people are doing things that are more esoteric, such as Chinese medicine or internal practices. And that is this theoretical component, meaning people don't understand, number one, what they're doing in the larger context, what the practice, what the process is, and the various dynamics and variables that they're working with. Meaning, like for just a couple of examples, I've met so many like Chinese medicine practitioners, some students, some of many, many years, that really have absolutely no deeper understanding of the actual system or cosmology that they're operating under, and their view of life, their view of what a person is, their view of what medicine is, just basically limited and relegated to like symptomology or some very mundane type of thing. And another example is, you know, people doing Qigong or internal arts in just a largely salvational or sentimental and extremely vague kind of way. And this ties into one of the reasons that I really enjoy is, number one, it's not a cerebral process. It's not contingent upon hopes and dreams and aspirations for salvation. It's not sentimental. It's not vague. It's not based on faith. It's not based on, you know, daddy issues or worship of any type of person or figure or things outside of yourself. And actually it's just very common sense, practical, and a bit more tangible probably than people really think. And all of these things tie back to my original point, which is that it really helps to actually have a deep and thorough understanding of the theory, and also understanding that theory is different at various stages of the process. And I've written articles about this, and it generally was met with complete confusion because, I mean, I guess for obvious reasons, just looking at basic concepts. You know, we could look at like something such as the Dantian, the lower Dantian. A lot of people will be like, oh, well, it's just like the chakra, and it's correlated with this chakra, or the lower Dantian is this one thing. But in reality, what the lower Dantian is varies depending on dozens of variables. Like and changes and can change. So it can get very complex, and this is just like really a simple, almost universal thing. But again, people generally use words that they don't know what they mean in a theoretical way and also a practical, experiential type of way. And they also don't understand what those words mean and those experiences mean within a larger context and how it relates to a certain specific process of skill acquisition. And that leads to my next thing that I quite enjoy, which is that it really comes down to being based on building skill, which is a really rough translation of what the word gong even means. So it's like, for example, people might go to a Qigong workshop and spend 12 hours like visualizing and just learning movements and breathing and like slightly relaxing, but relying a lot on like sentimentality, really vague things, a lot of just mental cerebral functioning, which is, there's nothing wrong with that. But if we look at what the words gong mean, it's like skill, moving towards building a skill, moving towards developing some quality within ourselves. It becomes almost like, well, that word doesn't match the thing, because in any other aspect of life, we would get this. You know, if you wanted to be a really amazing painter, but you don't know how to paint, you don't show up to like a mastery level painting workshop because you don't know how to paint. You don't have that skill. And if I taught you to visualize yourself doing A, B, and C, that could be helpful for a certain aspect of the creative process, but in actuality has very little to do with painting and actually being a skilled painter. And that's a really rough example, but just trying to illustrate some kind of basic principle. So it's really, in that sense, very tangible, meaning skill is there or it isn't, or it's in a process of being developed or it isn't. It's not really that magical or mystical or like alternative. So getting into something a little bit more, I think, interesting is basically through these processes and learning these skills, you basically start to show up in the world in a different way. Meaning you start operating internally upon different mechanisms that most of the world isn't, which can be fun and interesting, and can also be quite isolating and entertaining, which is why there's other aspects to the training. But it's basically a process of deconditioning and reconditioning, and hopefully getting to more of a state of neutrality, a state of even keelness and centeredness and rootedness, and being earthed and grounded, which is, again, not the mechanism that which most of the planet can relate to or operates from, because you're actually starting to work with the actual energetic mechanics of how you show up in the world, how you interact with the world, how the world affects you and how you affect it, working with that on a very deep, real level that, again, it's not cerebral, it's not theoretical, it's not based on what's happening in your head, it's not based on positive thinking, it's not based, really has nothing to do with any of that. Because, like, I mean, you could be thinking negative thoughts and like all these types of things, and yeah, that might hinder the process a bit, but the process is still going to take place, and there's still going to be changes, which that even leads to deeper, more challenging aspects as far as looking at what we actually think we are, what we actually think our life is, and what we actually think the relationship between those two things is. Because what happens is, societally, culturally, pretty much everyone is operating under the same mechanisms, maybe slightly rearranged. But for me personally, that has never made sense on any type of level. It's never been interesting. It's never been rewarding or harmonious. It's just never worked on really any type of way. And believe me, I really tried for many years, because I just didn't have any other options, as many of us do, fortunately or unfortunately. But really, for me, this is a really interesting aspect of the training, and hopefully through these few reasons I provided some more tangible concepts and something a bit more relatable and perhaps interesting in the sense that if we understand health as how ancient Chinese medicine defined it or looked at it or studied it, which has its derivatives and really comes out of alchemy. It's basically looking at the quality of information moving through our system, basically how information is coming in from the world, how that's being filtered and processed, and then how that's coming out. It's this in and out flow, which relates to basically the more efficiently and effectively our five spirits are able to manifest our Ming, which is our life purpose, destiny, life path, fate. All those words are kind of it, but not at the same time, because it's a large concept. Basically, the more that's able to flow efficiently and smoothly, then there's going to be a greater degree of health. The more that is blocked, and the more we are living from a purely distorted aspect of our acquired mind, and basically just combined with the natural process of life, which is birth to death, meaning birth and then we grow, meaning it's natural as we get older for things to slow down. Our body is not as conductive. Rotations and flows aren't happening as potent because that's the natural process of life. Combine that with these perhaps inability for these deeper aspects of ourself to translate and come through our physicality and be expressed in the world, then we're looking at, on a deep level, dis-ease. So that's where, on some fashion, the health aspects and benefits of these practices come in, but they're not. It's not the goal. It's not like find your life purpose because it'll make you healthy, and Qigong will be good for you, and here's we're going to heal all your diseases. It's not really the aim of Taoism. There's nothing wrong with having those desires, because it's pretty common sense that being healthier is better than not being healthier. Being happier is better than not. Having a spiritual connection to yourself and life and having a positive impact in the world. These are all, at least in my opinion, kind of more enjoyable ways of living your life. So yeah, it's not that esoteric. So yeah, hopefully that makes sense. But that's really giving a somewhat broader context, but also still like this is just granules of rice in comparison to what is really happening and what's really going on, and the overall interest and focus of the practices. But again, I just wanted to offer my subjective things, which are somewhat extrapolated out and may not necessarily totally reflect Taoism in the traditional sense. But for me, again, just wanted to provide context and a bit more maybe relatable things, because I think generally the issues that I've experienced are issues that a lot of people have also experienced. So yeah. Anyways, thanks for watching this video. Check the link below to learn more about the workshop that I'm teaching. I highly recommend signing up. I've already got people flying in from all over the country, some people from other countries coming to it, and then obviously people locally coming to it. So it's going to be great. And I'll talk to you soon.